I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would cheat on her husband. I was the one who believed in vows, in loyalty, in the sanctity of marriage. But life has a way of unraveling you, piece by piece, until you're left staring at the person in the mirror and wondering how you got there. This is my story, and I'm not proud of it. But it's the truth. My name is Claire, and I'm 34 years old. I've been married to Daniel for 8 years. We live in a quiet suburb of Denver, Colorado, in a house with a white picket fence and a golden retriever named Max. From the outside, our life looked perfect. Daniel is a good man, kind, steady, and reliable. He's an accountant, the kind of guy who remembers to take out the trash without being asked and always kisses me
goodbye
in the morning. But somewhere along the way, the spark between us faded. We became roommates, co-parents to our dog, and little more. I didn't notice it at first. It crept up on me slowly, like a fog rolling in. The days blurred together, filled with work, household chores, and the occasional dinner with friends. Daniel and I still talked, but our conversations were surface level, about the weather, the news, or what to have for dinner. The deep, late-night talks we used to have? Those were gone. The passion? A distant memory. I told myself it was normal. Marriage wasn't supposed to be a fairy tale, right? It was about stability, partnership, and building a life together. But deep down, I felt empty. I missed the excitement, the butterflies, the feeling of being desired. I missed feeling alive. That's when I joined the gym. It started innocently enough. I wanted to get in better shape, to feel good about myself again. I signed up for a membership at Iron Peak Fitness, a sleek, modern gym downtown. It was there that I met Ethan. Ethan was my personal trainer. He was 28, with tousled dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a body that looked like it had been carved out of marble. His arms were thick with muscle, his chest broad, and his smile, God, his smile, was like a magnet. He had this confidence, this energy, that drew people to him. When he walked into a room, everyone noticed. Our first session was intense. He pushed me harder than I'd ever been pushed, correcting my form with hands that lingered just a little too long on my waist or shoulders. At first, I told myself it was nothing. He was just doing his job. But the way he looked at me, like he saw something in me that no one else did, it stirred something inside me that I hadn't felt in years. Over the next few weeks, I found myself looking forward to our sessions. I'd wake up early, put on my best workout clothes, and drive to the gym with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in a long time. Ethan was always there, waiting for me with that same easy smile. He'd push me, challenge me, and then praise me when I did well. "You're stronger than you think, Claire," he'd say, his voice low and steady. And for the first time in years, I believed it. It wasn't just the workouts. It was the way he made me feel, seen, valued, desired. Daniel hadn't looked at me like that in years. He loved me, sure, but it was a quiet, comfortable love. With Ethan, it was electric. Every touch, every glance, every word felt charged with meaning. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Ethan suggested we grab a smoothie. "You've earned it," he said with a wink. I hesitated for a moment, but the thought of spending more time with him was too tempting to resist. We sat at a small cafe near the gym, sipping our drinks and talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his dreams of opening his own gym someday, and I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone in years. That night, as I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I told myself it was harmless, just a crush. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was falling for him, and I didn't know how to stop. Things escalated quickly after that. Our sessions became more intense, more intimate. He'd stand close to me, his breath warm against my skin as he adjusted my form. His hands would linger on my hips, my back, my shoulders. And then, one day, he kissed me. It happened after a late-night session. The gym was empty, the lights dim. We were standing by the weight racks, and he was showing me a new exercise. His hands were on my waist, guiding me into position. And then, without warning, he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, but then it deepened, and I felt myself melting into him. All the guilt, all the fear, all the rationalizations I'd been clinging to, they vanished in that moment. All I could think about was how good it felt to be wanted. The air was cool but charged, thick with an unspoken tension that had been building for weeks, maybe even months. Every breath I took felt deliberate, as though the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for the moment to unfold. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder of the electricity that crackled between us. It was impossible to ignore now, this pull that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long. Tonight, it demanded to be acknowledged. Our movements were hurried but deliberate, a blend of excitement and nervous energy that made every touch feel magnified. I reached for the hem of my tank top, my fingers trembling slightly as I gripped the fabric. When I pulled it over my head, our hands brushed, just a fleeting moment of contact, but it sent a jolt through me, a spark that made my breath hitch. He stepped closer, his eyes locking onto mine, and I could see the same mix of eagerness and hesitation reflected in his gaze. There was something unspoken in that look, a silent promise of trust and vulnerability that made my chest ache in the most beautiful way. We undressed slowly, each piece of clothing falling away like layers of armor we no longer needed. The gym, with its mirrored walls and rows of equipment, seemed to shrink around us, the space between us dissolving with every passing second. His hands were gentle as they traced the curve of my shoulder, his touch so light it felt almost reverent, as though he was afraid I might shatter under the weight of his desire. But I didn't want gentle, I wanted him, all of him, with the same intensity that had been simmering between us for so long. I wanted to feel the fire that had been building, to let it consume us both. It was as if the world stopped spinning. His lips were soft but insistent, and I could feel the heat of his skin against mine as he pulled me closer. His hands moved with purpose, exploring every inch of me as though he was committing the feel of my body to memory. I let myself melt into him, my own hands roaming over his back, feeling the muscles tense and relax under my touch. There was no rush, no urgency, just the two of us, lost in the moment, discovering each other in a way that felt both familiar and entirely new. The cool, smooth surface of a workout bench pressed against my back as he guided me down, his movements careful but confident. The gym, with its faint smell of rubber and disinfectant, felt strangely intimate now, the silence amplifying every sound, the soft rustle of fabric, the hitch of our breaths, the quiet moan that escaped my lips when his hands found the places that made me tremble. It was surreal, being here like this, surrounded by the tools of discipline and routine, yet feeling anything but disciplined. This was raw, unfiltered, and utterly consuming. When our bodies finally came together, it was like a puzzle piece clicking into place. I gasped at the sensation, a wave of pleasure crashing over me, but it was more than just physical. There was an emotional depth to it, a connection that went beyond words. I could feel it in the way he held me, in the way his breath hitched when I touched him, in the way his eyes never left mine. It was as if we were speaking a language only the two of us understood, a silent exchange of trust and desire that left me breathless. We moved together, our bodies finding a rhythm that felt natural, effortless. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word only deepened the bond between us. I had never felt so exposed, so raw, but there was no fear, only a sense of safety, of being completely and utterly seen. He was my anchor, and I was his, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. The gym, with its cold metal and sterile surfaces, faded into the background. All that existed was him, and me, and the space we shared. When it was over, we lay tangled together on the padded floor, our breathing slow and steady, our hearts still racing. His arm was draped over my waist, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my skin, and I could feel the warmth of his body pressed against mine. The gym, usually so full of noise and movement, felt strangely peaceful now, the silence wrapping around us like a blanket. There was a quiet contentment in the air, a sense of peace that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I turned to look at him, and he met my gaze with a soft smile, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name but felt deeply in my chest. We didn't speak, there was no need. The silence between us was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding that what we had shared had changed something fundamental. I didn't know what would happen next, but in that moment, I didn't care. All that mattered was the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing, and the quiet certainty that whatever this was, it was real. As I closed my eyes, letting myself drift in the afterglow, I knew that this was just the beginning. The gym, with its echoes of discipline and routine, had become the backdrop for something entirely new. The door had been opened, and there was no turning back. Whatever came next, we would face it together. After that, we started meeting in secret. We'd sneak away to his apartment after the gym, or find quiet corners where no one could see us. It was thrilling, intoxicating, and completely reckless. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't stop myself. For the first time in years, I felt alive. But the guilt was always there, lurking in the background. Every time I came home to Daniel, I felt like a fraud. He'd ask me how my day was, and I'd lie through my teeth, telling him everything was fine. I hated myself for what I was doing, but I couldn't bring myself to end it. Ethan had become my escape, my addiction, and I was too far gone to walk away. It all came crashing down one night when Daniel came home early from a business trip. I was supposed to be at the gym, but instead, I was at Ethan's apartment. Daniel called me, and when I didn't answer, he started to worry. He tracked my phone, something he'd never done before, and showed up at Ethan's door. The look on his face when he saw me there, it's something I'll never forget. The hurt, the betrayal, the anger, it was all there, written in his eyes. I tried to explain, to apologize, but the words felt hollow. There was no excuse for what I'd done. We tried to work through it. We went to counseling, talked for hours, and cried more tears than I thought possible. But the trust was gone, and without trust, there was no foundation left to build on. Daniel moved out a few months later, and we filed for divorce shortly after. Ethan and I didn't last either. What had felt like passion in the moment turned out to be just that, a moment. Without the secrecy, the thrill, the forbidden nature of it all, we fizzled out. He moved on to someone else, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my life. Now, as I sit here writing this, I can't help but wonder how things might have been different if I'd made better choices. If I'd talked to Daniel about how I was feeling, if I'd sought help instead of running to Ethan. But the truth is, I can't change the past. All I can do is learn from it. If you're reading this and you're tempted to cross that line, let me be your cautionary tale. The excitement, the passion, the thrill, it's not worth the pain it leaves behind. Trust me, I've been there. And I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it.